Good afternoon and welcome to this second webinar in the Higher Education Dialogue series that has been organised by British Council colleagues in the wider Europe region. I'm Madeleine Ansell, Director of Education at the British Council. These webinars have been organised to share ideas about how universities should or even must respond to the challenge raised by the current global pandemic. Universities have worked incredibly hard to move much of their teaching and learning online. And it's already clear that this could lead to real innovation with particular benefits for students who need to learn flexibly, perhaps because they have working or caring responsibilities alongside their study, or even because it enables them to work at their own pace. Many universities have demonstrated that they can innovate at pace, confounding critics who see them as slow and weighed down by bureaucracy. But universities have always been about more than the formal teaching and learning. The late night coffee with fellow students is often as important as the lecture by the eminent academic. And of course, people come to university not just to learn about the subject they're officially studying, but to take part in a range of co-curricular and extracurricular activities. For some people, it is working on the student newspaper, acting in student plays, or volunteering for local charities, for example, that shows them the direction their life should take. For others, it's meeting someone inspirational who changes their worldview, or meeting someone like-minded who becomes a business or even a life partner. So how can universities use the innovations they have put in place to support students during the pandemic to offer a different and better university experience in the future? And can it help us with the perennial problem facing so many countries? How can we create a higher education system that delivers high quality and inclusive education at scale? Is the campus university still the best model? To help us explore these issues, we have three excellent speakers. Professor Yusuf Baran, who is Rector of the Izmir Institute of Technology, Sam Brenton, Director of Education, Innovation and Development at the University of London, and Professor Roderick Watkins, Vice-Chancellor of Anglia Ruskin University. Each of them is going to speak for about 5 minutes from their experience. I will then ask them questions, some of which have been collected in advance, and some of which will be sent to me by Summer Shah, who is moderating this session. So please do send in any questions that occur to you. Please send them to all panelists and all attendees using the chat function. Finally, I'll just note that this session is being recorded, and I hope we will be able to make the recording available afterwards. So without further ado, I'm going to turn to Professor Yusuf Baran for his thoughts from his experience. Professor.
So thank you very much. First, I want to thank to British Council for organizing this webinar and inviting me to share my ideas and my approach to the current global crisis. So we are facing with a global problem, which is coronavirus, COVID-19. And when I think about the best thing to do, or who is the most clever living organism in the world, is the adaptation ability of the humankind. So we adapt all the change, and then we provide the survival. Right now there is a big change, there is a big problem, and we need to adapt this change. This problem showed us that the borders are artificial, because there is no physical borders between the countries and between the societies. So one infection in China, in Wuhan, and now it's spread to more than 150 countries, and all the humankind is facing with this challenge, with this problem. The same is happening to the universities as well. I mean, we also face with the problem. And how can we provide the transformation of this problem? How can we solve the problem? Then the human resources and the infrastructure of the universities have the vital importance to make a change, to make a positive change to find a solution to the current problem. When we think about the main responsibilities of the universities, we have education responsibility, the research, and the commitment to society. So after start of this pandemic, this coronavirus problem, all Turkish universities moved to online or the distance education. Right now in my university, we have 1,596 classes going on online education. New generations were ready. I mean, our current students are ready for the online, for the distance education, for the digital world. But of course, it is not the same for the senior professors as well. So the senior people having more difficulty to adapt the current change. And on that issue, we have two different kind of classes, the theoretical one and the practical ones. For the theoretical classes, we don't have the problem. So the professors go online and then teach the classes, and the students are taking the classes. But for the practical one, for the laboratory one, for the applied classes, then we might have problem. And virtual reality is a way to overcome the practical classes problem. On the other hand, evaluation process is changing. I mean, after we moved from the face-to-face teaching to online education, then evaluation process has also changed from the regular exams to homework or project-based evaluation assessment of the classes. Well, universities are the most important bodies for any country, and we provide the human resources that are needed for the government, for the private sectors, or whatever is needed. I mean, we provide the human resources of the countries and the society. But of course, when we think about the movement of education from face-to-face to distance education, then we might lose ecosystem of the universities, because we not only produce the leaders that are having the capacity for physics, for mathematics, for engineering, for medicine, but also there are some soft skills that the students should earn, like the leadership, like entrepreneurship, like open-minded, team player, and we want our students to be the world citizen. When we move from face-to-face education, I mean the campus education, to online education, we might lose these kind of capabilities that our students should earn. Then, after having their degrees from the online education, our students may not have these soft skills, because they will be in a room, so they will sit on a table, on a chair, and then, you know, there is a computer and someone is talking to them, but there is no interaction. In my country, in Turkey, we have a quite rich culture. I mean, from south to west, south to north, west to east, the culture is quite different. And when the students come to the universities, there will be an amazing cultural enrichment. And the same is true for the internationalization of the universities as well. I mean, in my institute, we have students from 6 continents, from 47 countries, and there is a big interaction, big communication between the students, among the students. But when you move from face-to-face education to online, to distance education, we might lose these capabilities that our students should earn. When we talk about the research side, currently the normal research, except for coronavirus related research, it's almost stopped, because we don't want our graduate students to come to the universities and join the lab and do the research. But we just focused on the coronavirus related research in our country, and all the others are stopped. But it doesn't mean that the scientists or the graduate students are, you know, stopped to study. But now we are working more on application of the funds, and also, you know, there are a lot of accumulated data, then, you know, article writing or the book chapter writing. So these kind of scientific activities are going on. In the future, how can we overcome the research related problem coming from the coronavirus infection. We need to optimize the time, I think, and then we need to increase the productivity. We need to benefit from the artificial intelligence, and we need to be very optimum for the usage of the research laboratories. Currently, when we think about the graduate students working in a lab, so they are coming not only to do the experiments, but they write article, they read article, they apply for the funds, they provide the research projects, and all these kind of activities are going in the lab. But I think if we go through with this coronavirus or coronavirus-like global challenges, then we will increase the productivity by using artificial intelligence, and we will decrease the number of the experiments that we have to run in the lab. And of course, then it will be like having an appointment from the research lab, from the wet lab. So you can't, as a graduate student, come at 8 and then study by 8 p.m. or 9, whatever. But then there will be some time intervals that any graduate students can come and do the experiment. So the productivity will increase, the time management will increase, and appointment process will come to the university as well. The main properties of the universities are contribution to the society, and society expects the universities to create the leaders of the future, not only for the government but also for the private sector as well, for the business world as well. And of course, we have to generate human resources, not only having academic training, but also having soft skills that will provide them to find a job and to find a position, and of course to provide the development and the transformation of the society, the government sector or the private sector. But another important issue here is that when we think about the universities, we have the richest human resources and the strongest infrastructure as a body. So regarding with these kind of global challenges, not only the coronavirus, but also the global warming, the poverty, the purity, the peace, all these kind of problems expect universities to provide solutions and also transform the society as well. So the universities should continue for their commitment to society and should continue to contribute to society. The universities are the bodies not only to find a solution to any kind of problem, but foresee the problem and then find the solution before it comes out. This global challenge teach us that the governments, the private sectors should support more, should fund more the universities, because universities are the ecosystems or the places that we find the solutions to global challenges and the problems. And I am quite optimistic that we will find a vaccine. We will find, actually we have a lot of diagnostic test kits, and we will find the vaccine and we will find the solution to coronavirus and any kind of global challenge, global problem. But we need more support from the society and from the government as well. So
I think everyone's going to agree with you on that, Professor Barron. I think there's going to be widespread support from panelists for the proposition that universities are incredibly important and need support at this time. Thank you so much for that contribution. I think you raised a lot of really, really interesting issues that we'll come back to. One in particular that I noted was this question about how universities that are typically so international maintain the ability to help their students become world citizens and interact with students from many different countries if they are having for a while to move online. I'm now going to come to Sam Brenton from the University of London for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Madeline, and good afternoon, everybody. This is really a timely discussion because, of course, the campus is so central to a university's identity and an idea of itself. And there's a great deal of emotional attachment and pride that we have in the campus. But of course, a university is not its campus, it is its people. And we know this very well at the University of London because we have about 50,000 students on our distance learning programs all over the world. And they never come to campus. They come for graduation, many of them, but they don't come to campus. So the campus is the people. And we have already a digital campus as well as our various physical campuses in the Federal University. So when it comes to teaching, we're thinking about this as an educational design challenge, primarily. It's a financial, it's a logistical and technical challenge, of course, but the fundamental challenge is an educational one. And we can express it like this. Over the next 3 months or so, we need to ensure that our teaching doesn't rely on physical proximity to be effective. We've got to do it while we're running to stand still, and everyone who works with us is exhausted. Our students are as well. In the face of ill health for many of us and the risk of ill health. We've got to do it over the summer without meeting face to face, and also in the teeth of an emerging financial crisis, both in the sector, in the country and in the world at large. There are many unknowns. We don't know to what extent the next academic year is going to be disrupted. We only know that it will be. We don't know whether, as we move out of lockdown, there are going to be waves of suppression of freedom of movement in the UK and elsewhere. This may happen at different speeds in different regions, we just don't know. Or perhaps there'll be a vaccine in September and it's universally effective. We don't know whether and when international students will be able to travel to the UK. We don't know how the pandemic will affect the buying decisions of domestic and international students, or indeed how the recession that's coming will affect the demand for higher education. Traditionally, demand goes up in a recession. And we don't know whether students will warm to the online mode, having tasted it, or whether there'll be a move back to face-to-face teaching as the real thing. And of course, we have major uncertainties around the long-term impact on universities, finances, and the extent to which the government here is going to be willing and able to stabilise the sector. But we do know that we need to plan and anticipate for the full spectrum of possibilities. We know that no university's business continuity plans ever going to be complete, again, without a credible plan for how to keep teaching and assessing when the physical state is out of action. And we know that this mitigation needs to be built into our business as usual delivery model. It can't just be a contingency or a fallback. So we also know that it is perfectly possible to offer a rich and effective learning experience to a physically dispersed student body. We've been doing it for 160 years using the technology at hand across the globes. And we know as well that our students are facing a variety of challenges beyond and out with their education with us, but which nevertheless affect their education. These are domestic, economic, sociocultural challenges. So where do we look for answers? Well, we have one solution at the University of London, which is core to our own operations, which is simply not to rely on buildings for large-scale education. With our 50,000 students all around the world, we've achieved that. We've been doing it for a long time. Students study either entirely online or with our network of teaching centres around the globe, many of which are esteemed universities in their own rights. But most universities aren't online ready in that way. They aren't equipped with the infrastructure or the processes or the capacity or the expertise to simply go online quickly. We know that we can't just try and replicate the campus teaching on the fly. It's been extraordinary, the swift emergency response, the Zoom lecturing, etc., etc. It's been extraordinary to keep the show on the road, to find alternative assessment methods so quickly. But that isn't higher education as we know it or want it to be. Learning is not transmission. It's not just lecturing. It's about interactions between communities of learners. And we know, of course, that hybrid or blended or mixed mode learning isn't new. It's established and it can work very well. And indeed, I think those institutions which have already deployed as core to their teaching method elements of the flipped classroom are probably already quite resilient compared to many others. So it strikes me that in developing a teaching model for the post-COVID landscape, we need to borrow from our existing experience of distance online learning, hybrid learning, mixed mode teaching, but to think about it perhaps in a new way. So we're thinking about it as a kind of universal design for learning, to create a way of teaching which is space independent. So it's not quite just online learning, it's not quite just blended learning. It's got to be equally effective whether everyone's in a room together, whether the students are in a room but the teacher isn't, whether some students are in the room and some aren't, and a mixture of those factors at different times. And it's no small challenge, it's really, really interesting challenge. And I'm sure we're up to it. And we have to do it with the technology at hand and very rapidly as well. But that's how we're approaching it. You know, our member institutions in the University of London all have different approaches because they have different profiles and factors at play. But I think at core for us, it's this educational design challenge around creating a kind of universal design for teaching and learning.
Thank you very much. That's absolutely fascinating. And I think I'd quite like to come back to the concept you mentioned at the beginning, that the university is not a campus, but it's its people, its students, and how your concept of universal design of learning operates to make that a reality, and also perhaps what you know from your research about what works in terms of creating learning that is independent of space in the way that you described. So I'll leave you to mull over that while I turn to Professor Roderick Watkins to give us a view from Anglia Ruskin University.
Thank you, Madeleine, and good afternoon or good evening to everybody. Thank you, British Council, for inviting me along to this event. So Anglia Ruskin, or ARU, is it's a multi-campus university. It's about 32,000 students in Cambridge, Chelmsford and London. And I think what I'd like to just give a few remarks around is how we see our future. So not so much September, a bit around September, but really post-September, kind of a year or 2 years down the line, and try and draw together some of the threads that have already been raised. I guess the main point I would emphasize is that we don't see our future after September anything like a year ago. So we're not aiming to build a future which looked like it was a year ago. Even if it were possible to do that, so even if the virus were, even if we were all inoculated against the virus, we wouldn't be aiming to do that. And that's partly because the rate of change that has been forced upon us has allowed us to do in 2 or 3 months, or probably less, in 8 weeks, about 4 years of our digital strategy. So we've accelerated all sorts of internal change processes. We've just broken down all sorts of silos and annoying bureaucratic ways of working, which is fantastic, which we thought would take 4 years and has probably taken about 8 weeks. So we want to bank a lot of what we've learned about agile working, about blended learning. So Sam talked about universities focusing on flipped learning and on blended learning, and that has always been ARU's trajectory, but we've really accelerated that. So I'm pretty confident that all our lectures, well, I'm very confident all our lectures will be online in September. I'm pretty confident all our lectures will be online forever. It seems to me we will be using face-to-face engagement on campus for particularly rich, nuanced interpersonal engagement, which the lecture just isn't. We all know a lecture really isn't. And you can replicate a lot of the lecture online, and you can replicate nothing of the individual tutorial, well, something, but not so much. And in particular, you can't replicate the active collaborative work which can happen when students come together. So the risk for us, the thing we fear losing most in an online only world is actually not so much about what we would be unable to give to students, but about what students would be unable to give to each other. And we are very confident in our belief that our students learn as much from their peers as they do from us, that they grow and they become better rounded global citizens through interaction with their peers, not with us. And so what we're looking to use our campuses for in the future, both in September, when it will have to be socially distanced, and further on, is a much more bespoke kind of way of designing interactions between students and academics and students and each other, and not the delivery of content. So this will be a properly flipped kind of educational activity. We are also at the university really focused on building engagements with the workplace and employers. We're the largest university in England for providing degree apprenticeships. And we're going to be the largest provider for degree apprenticeships in a number of public services over the next 5 to 7 years, because we're signing really massive contracts. So what we're looking for is a future where we blend a campus, which has a very specific kind of coordinating magnetic role in bringing together a sense of a learning community, with online for this really powerful way of delivering content, fostering communication, and allowing engagement with communities who can't easily travel, and the workplace. And the most difficult part actually is triangulation to the workplace, because often the technologies in the workplace and the capacity for them to innovate is held back. So one of the questions we were asked was, do we still need a campus? You know, I'm very confident ARU will still need all its campuses. I think there may well be an opportunity for them to be smaller and cheaper. And I think there may well be opportunities for us to grow our student population without growing our footprint, our physical footprint. And that for us is probably the way to drive the economies that will be required to stay afloat. I wanted to briefly talk about, there was a question we were asked to think about, what is the future function of universities, and is that being affected by COVID? I guess what the point I'd want to make about the future function of universities in the UK and more widely is to just make a plea for us all to recognise and champion the diversity of the sector to secure really good outcomes for our countries and their populations. We need a truly diverse HE sector where universities' kind of complementarity allows them to specialize and find really excellent ways to meet the needs of particular regions or particular populations of students or types of students or particular disciplines. And there's huge pressures on us all to try and mimic each other and try and all be more and more like UCL or more and more like whoever you want to pick. That's really not in the interests of our nations, and it's not in the interests of our sectors. So I'm hoping that post-COVID, we will see a re-energized commitment to supporting a diversification of the sector. Some of that I won't welcome, but I will expect to see it. I do expect to see increasing concentration of research funding in fewer universities. I don't welcome that, but I expect to see it. Some of it I will welcome, which is more properly recognizing the value of working with employers, the value of working with regional government, and the opportunities to be really excellent at a very specific thing and not everybody trying to mimic everybody else. And so I think the future function of universities, I hope, will become much more plural, that they will become much more diverse in identifying who their stakeholders are, and then being really excellent at serving those stakeholders. And when we do that, we're safe, because in the end, if our stakeholders advocate for us, we're safe, we're funded, and if the only people advocating for us are ourselves, we're probably not. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Watkins. And I do actually find your vision of a kind of turbocharged, flipped university, where really absolutely the most is made out of the face-to-face time, is quite an inspiring and exciting vision. So thank you very much to all of our speakers. I can see that we've had a tremendous number of questions and comments coming in from the audience. Many of them are quite linked to the question that I warned Sam I was going to come to him with. There are a lot of questions around how universities are going to make sure students are still able to get the soft skills. How is the university going to fulfill its pastoral functions in terms of student services towards students in a more digital world? And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what your experience from delivering your distance learning courses has taught you works in response to that.
Good question, thank you for that. Different people need different things from different kinds of higher education, right? So in the University of London, we're a federal university comprised of many wonderful universities that serve students mostly on campus, not entirely. And then we have our large distance learning population as well. And those are people from all over the world. There's amongst that population, traditional assumptions about what higher education is for and who it's for don't exist. So most of them aren't 18 to 21. We have people from 18 to 80, people learning from all over the world, people who perhaps don't have a kind of traditional academic background, people for whom this is the opportunity to get the knowledge and skills to transform their lives in their home countries. And so different populations of students have different needs. And the kind of platonic ideal of a campus-based university where you have different kinds of gatherings of people and different kinds of services to support them just changes when you're online at scale. So in our model, you can either study independently online or via one of the teaching centres that we work with in partnership around the globe. And those teaching centres will typically, for large-scale undergraduate programs especially, provide all that kind of social and pastoral support function. But the actual education works pretty well at a distance. So what I don't know if there's an assumption behind questions like that about what a university ought to be doing that actually isn't necessarily relevant for all constituencies of students. But you know, we support all our distance learning students with pastoral care. We have online societies and clubs, and you find, as everyone's found in the last generation since the internet came along, that people self-organize, form communities of interest, learn together in unexpected ways. It's terrifically interesting and very fluid, but the core role of what the university is there to do changes with the time and with those different purposes.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to come to Professor Barron. So Professor Watkins talked about the fact that there will be changes in the UK system, that there may be greater concentration of research funding, that there may be greater prioritization and esteem for working with business. In your context in Turkey, do you see any similar changes to people's perception of what's valuable that universities do following this pandemic?
So in last couple of years, there are a lot of fundings which only support the funding coming from a collaboration between the universities and the industry. So if you apply to any grant as a scientist or just as a private sector, while you have, let's say, 1x support, but when you combine them together, I mean, university in collaboration with the industry, then you can get amazing fundings. And there are some specific fundings only for the university and the industry collaboration. There are some, for example, there are some PhD scholarships, and this scholarship is only for the candidates working for the industry, but doing PhD at the university. So there is, again, a collaboration over there. In my university, I mean, Izmir Institute of Technology, we are a state university, public university. When you compare 2019 and 2018, the number of university industry collaboration projects is up to 6.3 times more in 2019 as compared to 2018. An amazing increase, I mean 630% increase in the number of the university industry partnership projects. And the budget is 340% increase when you compare with the previous year. So there is a big support and expectation from the universities to collaborate with the industry. For the coronavirus specific, I mean, when you think about the coronavirus, there are some specific support for the university industry collaboration as well. So the Turkish government, I mean, in Turkey, we want the universities to closely work with the industry and vice versa. When you look at the number of the full-time R&D people in Turkey, it's like four or five times more as compared to 20 years back. So the number of the PhDs, the number of the master of student, I mean, expert people in the industry is going up. So the support to university industry collaboration is increasing. And even we have National Science Foundation, which is to be, we know is as TÜBİTAK. TÜBİTAK currently support more university and industry collaborative research grants. And when you think about the international grants as well, I mean, Turkey National Science Foundation has more than 60 bilateral agreements with the different countries. And even when you apply these international grants, you also should have a partner from the industry. In last 2 decades, in Turkey, we increased the number of the technopark. These technoparks are, most of them are located within the university campuses. And also there are a lot of supports and the funding opportunities for the technopark companies to collaborate with the professors from the universities. A big support to professors as well to establish their own company and then, you know, run their companies because they can get permission from the universities. They can establish their companies and then they can, I mean, they can transfer their information from the scientific data to an economical value. So in Turkey, we also support this because we believe in that universities in collaboration with the private sector or vice versa will increase an economical growth in Turkey as well. And over here, you combine the capabilities of the both sides. I mean, let's say private sector has economical power, while the universities have strong human resources and a strong infrastructure for research. When you combine these two capabilities, then you can get a good product which can contribute the economical growth of the country.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to come to Professor Watkins and combine two questions that I think are linked that have come in from the audience. One is about equity, particularly where some people do not have access to the same quality of equipment to engage with online teaching as others, and what thinking Anglia Ruskin has done about that. And very linked to that is preparation for those students who might still be at school, but are thinking about coming through to university, and how universities can support schools to give them the right preparation to succeed once they arrive.
Thanks, Madeline. Yeah, they're really, really excellent questions. I think long run, the evidence suggests that blended learning enhances equitable access to HE. So there are some remarkable success stories in America and in Australia of universities which have moved from purely campus-based to blended learning and driven down the cost point on entry. And for many students, the inability to access HE is specifically attached to the cost of entry and or the cost of undertaking. And clearly online has lower costs of undertaking. You typically don't need to leave home. You typically can work part-time. And like I said, many providers have been able to drive down costs. We certainly cannot do that in the short term, although that would help equity. I believe we could do that long term, but it would be a long-term thing. It would be about securing benefit from an investment. In the very short term, what we've done is buy laptops for students. So we have found quite a substantial amount of money out of our reserves and created a laptop fund and a COVID hardship fund. And our students who are in severe financial hardship are receiving loans or grants, depending on their hardship, for living expenses and indeed for laptops. Now that doesn't bring them broadband access, and you know there will clearly be some students who are really disadvantaged by this, and that's a serious problem. All we can do is seek to give them the opportunity to return to campus in September when we can. In terms of schools, there are already some really excellent initiatives in the UK, and I'm sure there are in the other countries joining today, on a national level of trying to put together kind of equivalent of the OU. So if you look at the power of the Open University to bring higher education to a mass audience aimed at adults, there's clearly a platform for us to create something like an open school across the UK to support schools that are closed down short term, but much more importantly, in my opinion, to develop the skills of online learning, of online community building, and as Sam talked about, fostering the support that young people can bring to each other when they join in these bespoke groups. And I think that that will be really significant. So ARU is doing that in a really tiny way. We are creating online platforms for some of our feeder schools and colleges, but it's got to be a national effort. I think there's a real opportunity to create a really rich, powerful backbone of digital learning for the school-age population in the UK. And that would be fantastic, especially if universities are involved in designing it and running it. That would be great.
Thank you very much. Sam, I'm seeing quite a lot of questions that are asking about teaching of those subjects that require a lot of laboratory time. Now, I don't know whether the University of London also offers a lot of hard STEM subjects or medical sciences among your distance learning offering, and whether, if you do, you use teaching centres. But do you have any thinking about how universities can continue to enable students to get the lab experience and the clinical experience that they need to get if this pandemic continues for a while?
Well, it simply is the case that there are some things that you can not do online and have to do in a physical location. That's simply the case. And I don't think that anyone would make the argument that it's not. I think what we're looking at, I think the common theme through these discussions is that what we're seeing is a great acceleration, an acceleration of trends that lead us to think about what's core about physical proximity in dedicated spaces and what isn't. And if the flows of students and teachers in and out of our physical spaces is going to change for a while or be reduced, it's making sure that we equip our spaces and our people to be able to use those windows of physical proximity for the core things that you need to do. So of course there is, you know, there are intractable issues around certain types of teaching and certain types of practice. You know, it's difficult to learn dentistry. It's very difficult to do dentistry at the moment. So, you know, the industries that we're training people for are also going to be changed, and practice within them is going to change. And so education for that is going to change as well, in ways I don't think we can fully comprehend at the moment. But for the most part, so that's just the case. But for the most part, of course, the way we learn out there in the world, we don't learn because we're in buildings together. You know, human beings have this wonderful drive to learn, and the campuses that we've built and the campus spaces, we haven't built them because otherwise people won't learn. We've built them as a way to contain, socialize, formalize the learning that goes on there. But learning itself continues. I mean, we invented writing so that we could exchange knowledge at a distance, notwithstanding lab classes, although it is true that the technologies around simulation of certain things and certain kinds of labs get better and better all the time, from quite basic browser-based stuff to VR technology and robotics and haptics and all that sort of thing. That's down the line. We have to use the tech we have right now. But an interesting question.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a really interesting concept, actually, thinking about time spent in proximity to other people as a precious resource, and really having to think hard about how we don't waste it, but make the most of it. And it reminds me actually of a story I was told when I visited a Russian university that has a supercomputer, and students get slots all through the night in order to use it. And if you're just not great at working between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., that's unlucky, that's your slot. Professor Barron, I'm seeing quite a lot of questions that express a kind of anxiety about whether international students will want to travel and how universities can encourage them to travel, even while there's quite a lot of uncertainty about mentioned that your university is very international.
I can't hear. I can't hear.
International students coming.
I'm sorry, but you know, it was frozen. Can you please repeat again? Sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
No, I've just had a message saying my internet connection is rubbish, which it's you know, his Vodafone, it is rubbish. I was asking you about international students and the anxiety out there around whether international students will still travel, and what you and your university are doing to encourage international students still to come.
Okay, so internationalization is one of our top priority in my university. And as I told before, we have students from 6 continents and 47 countries. We have professors from international area as well. And I think in this kind of global problems, Turkey is, I mean, all the countries are almost this, has the same safety. So even now in our dormitories, we have international students because they couldn't go back to their countries just because of cancellation of all the flights from and to Turkey. So they are here in our dormitories. They are having their online classes from the dormitory. And I don't think if this stops the movement or the circulation of international students, not only to my university, but also to the other countries and the universities as well. So 3 of my master students, they hold their master students. 2 got acceptance from the UK and 1 got acceptance from the Germany to do their PhD degrees. But unfortunately, currently, they cannot fly to Germany and the UK just because of the, as I told, cancellation of the flights. But it will not go like this. I mean, somehow we will find a vaccine or we will find a drug, a medicine, I mean, and then this problem will be okay. and then the movement or the circulation of international students will continue. And I think it should continue because as from the science diplomacy side, circulation of the university or the graduate students from around the world contribute the internationalization of the science and decrease the inequality of the science and education in developing and developed world, and it contributes it contributes this peace of the world as well. I mean, when the countries, when the societies, when different cultures know each other and interact with each other, then we become more and more world citizens. Then we generate world citizens. So this internationalization and the movement of the international students can stop for a while, but after that, after these global problems go down, then the flights and the movements will be open and the students will continue to circulate. For the next year, for example, we already filled around 50% of our positions for international students. Just yesterday, I had a meeting with my vice rector, and I learned that 50% of our international positions are full now, and still we have a way to go, and we still accept the applications. This is what I think, and this is what I hope, actually.
Thank you very much. This is a remarkably optimistic panel, I do have to say so, and actually it's quite an optimistic audience as well. I saw one person commenting that they believe that people will still want to travel and that will still want to learn. Roderick, so I was sort of asking myself whether I should come to you or Sam on this, but Sam's talked about the University of London model, which offers, which has partnerships with different universities around the world in order to provide the face-to-face teaching to students studying in their own country. Is this something that Anglia Ruskin is exploring or does already in order to support international students that decide not to come to the UK?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a really, really live question for us. It's a really interesting question for us. So we have students from, I think, 150, 160 countries normally traveling to the UK to study with us. Even if we could find a way for them to get everything they want without traveling, I don't want them to, because the richness that they bring to the UK student experience is really invaluable, really invaluable. So I still want to be able to offer something sufficiently rewarding and attractive that students will travel. However, I'm just not optimistic in the short term. I think international student mobility, I suspect it will be hit really very significantly for probably 2 intakes, 2 years rather than just 1. I think it'll be very significant. And I suspect that just as I'm learning to work from home and save a whole bunch of time on the M11 and money traveling, I suspect a lot of international students will also learn to study from home and save a whole bunch of money flying to and across the ocean. So, it's going to have to be really good, I think, to make people still want to travel in 2 or 3 years' time. Can have to be really good. So in answer to the specific question about Sam's model, this is very live for us. It's a very interesting question for us. So we do quite a lot of TNE, mainly in Malaysia, quite a lot in Trinidad and some in Europe. And we increasingly do some pure distance learning. What I'm really interested in is exploring the opportunities to blend those two, so we get something which is neither TNE nor distance learning, but it's a bit like Sam's model, where you have a partnership which causes those students who are undertaking the online element of the course to come together in some supported environment which creates that sense of a learning community, local and bespoke to them. That is something we're starting to have conversations around, and I think that's probably the short-term future for international education. It's not the one I really love because people travel less, but I think it's cost-effective. I think it's more safe, and I think it's more likely to be what works for the next 24, 36 months, I think. But, you know, I was an international student. I did undergraduate in America, postgraduate in France, and then a bit of, frankly, pretty poor quality postgraduate in England. I didn't say that because this is being recorded. And I would hate to have not had that, you know, that the richness of that experience absolutely defined my education. And I would hate for that not to be available to future generations of students.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm conscious that we're towards the end of this session, so I want to thank the panelists. I've certainly learned a huge amount from hearing you share your experiences, and it has also made me feel a lot better, although people have acknowledged the problems and the issues that we're going through at the moment. The general consensus seems to be that we will learn from this and we will develop a new blended model that could genuinely be better for students. It might offer more diversity, it might be more cost effective, it might, in terms of this pressure to improve the technology that supports distance learning, improve that very considerably. So I am leaving this feeling very optimistic, which I think is a good thing. I'm now going to turn to Summer, who's going to tell us a little bit about the next webinar in this series. Summer?
Thank you, Madeline. Yes, hi everyone. Just to say that the session we had last week and today's session, there were questions about assessment online. So obviously that is something that many universities now have to deal with, especially as we come to the end of term. So that's why for next week's session, as part of our higher education series, we'll focus on online assessment. You know, how you do it, what are the best practices, and how is that linked to the quality of the online education that, you know, has been discussed today as well. You know, do watch out for the invitation that will come from the British Council, and I look forward to seeing everyone next week at the same time for the next session.
Thank you very much, Summer. And with that, I'll thank all of the panelists one final time. We really, really appreciate you giving us your time and sharing your expertise and your insights and experience. Thank you very much. Thank you very much also to everybody who joined us remotely, and I hope you found it useful and that you will join us next time. Bye-bye.